Hello, my name is Alex and I am the host of How Bizarre Podcast, and this is episode 10 of the series. Hopefully you'll like it and the show will make some traction in the time ahead. So, what is this podcast about? It's about storytelling, and especially about stories that are obscure, unknown to the wider public, strange and sometimes inexplicable, content that somehow never got the attention it deserved. Stories that are forgotten in the mists of time regardless if they happened yesterday or some centuries ago. So if you are attracted to bizarre, shocking or just plainly weird stuff, I think you'll find this podcast very informative and perhaps even entertaining. This podcast is for mature audiences and listener discretion is advised. All that being said, now let us dive into episode 10 of How Bizarre Podcast. This episode is named Devil's Railroad, and we'll see why. In the long and infamous history of exploitation and in the annals of construction megalomania, a phenomenon known as the white elephants because of their uselessness, the Trans-Amazonian Railway stands out in all its meaninglessness and tragedy. The basic idea of this gargantuan project was conceived in the middle of the 19th century when two dreamers, Jose Palacios and Rudolf Kesselring, no relation with the Nazi general of the same name, dreamt about connecting the Atlantic with the Pacific Ocean through the Amazonian jungle. With railway being still a new technology in the middle of the 19th century, their dream will have to wait for decades. It wasn't until the rubber boom of the late 1800s and early 20th century that the idea would get a new lease of life. Bolivian government was keen to have a waterway all the way to the Atlantic. Being landlocked country, that would mean a lot for the trade. As it happens, America was hungry for rubber because of the explosion of motor vehicles, and a direct route to the rubber production would be a great asset. Americans even contracted a surveyor to assess the possibility of a Trans-Amazonian railway. After two unsuccessful bids to build the railway, finally in 1903 there was the third, this time successful bid to start the project. A Treaty of Petrópolis of 1903 between Bolivia and Brazil made way to the project. Brazilian authorities were bribed, so to speak, when Bolivia actually ceded territory of Acre to Brazil in return, expecting Brazilian side to bear the brunt of the project. And so construction of this infernal railway started in 1907, with the first rail lines being laid down, and would take 6 years for the lunacy to stop for good. Doomed in advance, the cursed project, also known as the Madeira-Mamre Railway, was supposed to bring civilization to the heart of the Amazon. Chances of success for this project existed only in the minds of politicians and nowhere else. Extremely difficult area for construction operations, at the beginning of the 20th century, without any infrastructure, hostile tribes, insects, diseases, jaguars and anacondas that roam around. Of course, when there are enough poor people who are in desperate need for work of any kind, assembling a workforce of dozens of thousands, it is not a problem. As they say here in the Balkans, supposedly it is better to work in vain than not to work at all. Even to die at work is better than no work at all. I don't know about you, dear listener, but I am sometimes shocked how mind-numbingly stupid some of the traditional proverbs are. The 366-kilometer railway, which became known as the Devil's Railroad, cost 6 years to build and 13,600 workers to die. It is said that one man was buried next to each wooden threshold on which the rails were laid. The building, which caused so much suffering to people who had never been lucky in their lives, did not have the opportunity to establish traffic. The Amazon proved to be stronger than progress, so finely embroidered on the Brazilian flag, and the vegetation and moisture swallowed the damn track, along with stations, tanks, locomotives. Arms that lead nowhere, stations that no one climbs on, locomotives that do not, they emit smoke, bridges where hope does not pass, thousands of nameless graves. Ironically, The rubber boom that was one of the deciding factors in starting such an ill-fated project wasn't to last much longer even if the damned railroad was completely finished. Owing to the invention of synthetic rubber and competition from Burman and Malayan rubber, which was cheaper, the reason for existence of this rail line had become a dead end. Only a small part of the railway remained that could be maintained and cleared of vegetation. The rest was forgotten, like many other projects where the stakes are someone else's destinies and lives. As someone with a dose of morbid resignation noticed, the reason why the railway was built was that in the other world there seemed to be a lack of tormented human souls, so the earthly demons decided to fill the quota. The train to conquer the Amazon has not yet set off. I hope you all liked episode 10 of this podcast. Thank you so kindly for listening, and I will be back next time for episode 11 of the How Bizarre podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, sharing, and above all, subscribe to this channel, dear listener. Because, why not? Join me next time for another bizarre adventure through space and time. Cheerio.